Hey everyone, this is John Help for DriveHood, and I want to go over a hand I thought that was interesting that I played the other day, mostly because you don't get into a lot of hands where you're facing such massive overbets. This is in a 200 NL 6 max cash game, and basically I'll go through the hand and kind of explain a little bit of my thought process here. Spoiler is I won the hand. But I'm a little more interested in kind of breaking down the thought processes here and hopefully something you can take away. You're not going to get even, the same thought process is going to apply even when you're just facing a normal size river bet, or a pot size bet or something. But you obviously want to be really, really careful about your reasoning when you get in a situation where you're getting really bad odds to make a call with a pretty marginal hand. So I'll go over the hand real quick. So I open 7-5 of hearts under the gun. Again, it's a 6 max table. Not something I'm typically doing. I usually play pretty tight under the gun, but I felt like I had a really good read of the table at this point. I was hoping to get in as many pots with this cutoff fish here as possible, but I felt pretty confident kind of what I thought everyone was doing. So I opened it. That's not super relevant because again, it's you have to make adjustments based on kind of how you're reading and seeing the table, and that's not a hand I highly recommend opening. But so, anyways, button calls, and just a little bit of background. So first, when I'm even deciding to open a hand like this, it's literally because I feel like I am getting to a point where I'm seeing some of the motivations that are going on with the opponents at the table. So, but in this case, I felt was possibly chasing a little bit because they were down a couple buy-ins. He kind of made a bad bluff against the fish, not so many hands ago. So I kind of felt like even from the get-go, I was probably going to get called and he was going to try and outplay me in this pot because he was going to be chasing a little bit. So I already had that feeling going in once I saw him call and I saw the flop. So the flop comes down, queen 8-8 with 2 clubs. I make a C bet because I'm going to take a stab. I don't have a ton of equity, in this spot. I have some credibility being under the gun, of course. And I have some backdoor draws with the hearts and straight, but obviously not huge equity here. So I get a call, and then the turn comes a 5. So now I make the nuts. I mean, a pair of 5s. So I check, planning to call because I'm expecting him to have floated a ton of hands here. Again, mostly based on my read and just kind of my general sense of how I thought he was thinking about the game. And as expected, he bets and a call. Again, because I feel like this is going to be his standard follow-through play. If he floats that flop with, any hands, anything from, 10-jack, ace-jack, king-10, anything, whatever he's going to have in his hand there, he's obviously going to try and take the pot at that point, especially if he has a club in his hand. And if he does have, an 8, a queen, and stuff like that, he's going to obviously also be betting a large percentage of the time as well. But so I call. River comes a 7 of spades, and I check, planning to probably call a lot of rivers. It really depended on sizing. So then, as you can see, my opponent does a pretty good size here, massive overbet. 80, almost 87 big blinds into a pot of 33.5 big blinds. So now I have 7s and 8s facing this overbet. So a couple things here. First of all, if my opponent had a flush, right, he's probably not going to make this kind of massive overbet. He's going to make probably some kind of standard, maybe up to pot size bet. Down below, if there was some kind of specific history going on with us, there might be a reason for him to maybe slightly overbet or something to that effect, but likely not this size. If he had, so like 8-7, which might be a hand that he might overbet, even though probably unlikely even this much. I have some card removal since I have a 7. The fact that I have a 5 and a 7 also removes the fact that maybe, he spiked a set on the turn of the river. And even so, in those situations, probably the massive overbet's a little bit much, unless, he's expecting me to have check called with a flush on the turn, which is, probably pretty unlikely. I'm going to continue to bet, expecting if he has a queen or something else. I mean, sometimes I'm going to check call, but, so the 5 and the 7 in my hand, kind of, we are limiting a lot of combos of him, hitting some jackpots there on the turn in the river, and also with 8-7. So really, my thought process came down to here about either he has quad 8s and he's hoping I have a flush or a full house, and he's trying to go for max value in a spot that doesn't really make a lot of sense how I played it, that I would necessarily have a big hand, especially with a river check. Check calling the turn, checking the river, I kind of look like I have a middling hand. So I look like I have a middling hand. The board looks kind of scary if you're not really over analyzing it too much. There's flushes, it's paired, all that kind of stuff. So let's run down, if he has 8x, he's not going to massively overbet here again, unless, we have some kind of history. It's kind of turning that into a bluff at that point, because I might even fold some flushes. Queen X, obviously, again, unless there's some kind of really strange history there, he's not going to be massively overbetting. Again, the 5s and the 7s are removed, so it comes down to a lot of, does he have a miracle hand where he has something like, pocket 5s and he has the last 2 combos, or he has pocket 8s. So there's really only a couple combos versus, I think there's a huge amount of hands he's going to have in here as just a desperate bluff. I just saw him as that kind of player that was capable. I was observing the fact that he was down a couple hands, the fact, of what I have in my hand, the card removal and all those things put together. It turns out he had ace jack of spades and took down that pot. I did take a little while to think about it. I didn't even think I hit my timer because I felt right off the bat that didn't make sense. It didn't add up. He wasn't going to bet a flush like this. It didn't look like I had a very big hand, so what is he expecting me to call with? All those kinds of factors go into play. So those are some of the things that you should be considering. It's, when you're getting really bad odds, you want to make sure you're really, really, really sure about how you're seeing the situation. And if you take your time and you really, break this down and consider, hey, what's my opponent thinking I'm calling with here? Is there any leveling processes going on? Any history that he thinks I'm going to react a certain way, which didn't exist in this particular spot? I just, was observing. I saw some of the things that he was trying to do to other players, and the fact he was down a couple buy-ins and just probably was kind of frustrated. So it's I saw it as a desperation bluff, which is what it was. So hope some of that helps you guys. Kind of a fun hand, and good luck with the poker games.